Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. Today's webinar is What You Need to Know About ABS Resins and is presented by Trinseo. Your presenters today are Bryan Lee and Jon Baldwin. Bryan is a graduate of Longwood University and has held various roles in the plastics industry for 7 years. He is now one of the business development managers for Trinseo North America, focusing on ABS. Also, Jon Baldwin is part of Trinseo's technical service and development team in North America. He is responsible for providing technical expertise and support for Trinseo's performance plastics business, driving product and new application qualification, specifically for Trinseo's Magnum ABS products and compounds, which are distinct in the marketplace because of their mass polymerization production method. My name is Alex Payne with UL, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Please send us your questions by typing them into the questions box located on your screen. Our panelists will answer them at the end of the presentation. We are also recording today's webinar, and we will send you a link by email when it has been posted to our website. Now, I would like to turn the presentation over to Bryan. Would you like to begin, Bryan?
Sure, Alex. Thank you very much. Welcome to all, and thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Bryan Lee, and I'm one of the account managers responsible for the Magnum ABS business for Trinseo in North America. During the next hour, we're going to discuss ABS as a potential material for your applications, including the differences in the production methods, meaning the emulsion process and mass polymerization. This topic is something we felt could be of value to the marketplace because, one, the demand for ABS continues to grow in the marketplace. Two, there's a significant difference in ABS material properties depending on the method of production. And three, this is something that's often overlooked in the ABS selection process because there is a lack of understanding on ABS manufacturing methods. Let me take just a minute and introduce Trinseo for those of you who are unfamiliar. Trinseo is a global materials company, a supplier of plastics, latex binders, and synthetic rubber. We were carved out of Dow Chemical in 2010 and became listed on the New York Stock Exchange in 2014. Trinseo produces a variety of plastics that I will discuss briefly on the following slide, but a few quick facts. Our revenue was $4.6 billion in 2018. We have approximately 2,500 employees. We have 16 manufacturing sites, and we have 11 R&D facilities worldwide. Here's an overview of our plastics business. Our portfolio of brands consists of polystyrene, SAN, and ABS products, and polycarbonate. We're vertically integrated with some of the feedstocks that we use to produce our plastics. And we're also a compounder that provides custom solutions to meet specific customer requirements. Today, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about ABS, which is a material Trinseo has been selling under the Magnum brand since 1986, and we've been producing it long before that. We use a proprietary technology for our ABS production, which is a continuous mass ABS polymerization process. We produce ABS in the United States, Europe, and China. China is our newest location, where we began production during the second half of last year. This is the last slide about Trinseo. We are a large organization with a global presence. At the same time, we're flexible and agile in our service model. We specialize in customizing solutions for our customers, and that's a key differentiator of ours in the marketplace. I want to move into the main part of our presentation and introduce to you my friend and colleague, our presenter, Jon Baldwin. Jon is a member of our technical service and development team in North America, and he's focused on our ABS business. Today, he's going to share the two methods of producing ABS, the more common emulsion method and the alternative mass polymerization process, comparing the two and discussing the benefits and applications of each. ABS, as you might know, is a very versatile material found in a variety of applications, including the furniture industry, the transportation industry, recreational vehicles, health and fitness equipment, kitchen and bath, and signage, and so on. We hope the information you see today is insightful and clarifies a few points for you. Before I turn the presentation over to Jon, I want to mention that while we're holding questions until the end, please feel free to submit them throughout the presentation by using the question field at the bottom of your screen. Jon?
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you to Alex and Paula for organizing everything in the background to make sure that we can make this webinar happen. To everyone joining, thank you for joining the webinar today. I trust that you will get some benefit out of this information that we are sharing. So just this slide here shows the agenda. I'm going to talk about an ABS overview, and then we're going to compare the two commercial production methods of ABS that are used today, and some of the benefits that we see with mass ABS that we produce at Trinseo. I'm also going to go into one of the quality control methods that we use for one of those specific benefits, and then just summarize those advantages that we talk about. And we'll get into the question and answer session at the end. So what is ABS? So ABS stands for it's an acronym for the monomers that are used in this material: the acrylonitrile, butadiene, and styrene. And it is a copolymer. It is not a terpolymer, even though it consists of 3 different types of monomers. So the styrene and acrylonitrile is the continuous phase for ABS, and there's a dispersed rubber phase, which you'll see an image of on the next slide, where I get into the production methods with the mass and the emulsion, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Someone this week actually gave me a good analogy that I wanted to share that was representative of what ABS is. If you think about a chocolate chip cookie, something as simple as that, where the SAN is the cookie dough and the butadiene rubber is sort of like the chocolate chips. It's dispersed throughout that medium. So, and then we'll get into some specific benefits from a comparative study where we compared one of our high impact Magnum ABS products with a similar impact of an emulsion product and a few others in that same category. The products in comparison were similar in melt flow as well. So we're going to look at the color of those products, the UV and thermal stability, the VOC content, and the gels or unmelts also. So as Brian mentioned, the applications for ABS are wide and vary from automotive to medical to consumer products and building and construction, sheet extrusion applications, or pipe and profile, edge banding as well, and a lot of injection molding applications also. So here on this slide, we have a simplification of the mass process on the top left and the emulsion process on the top right. And below that, you will see the different morphologies that result from that. So in the mass process, we start with the monomers, the styrene, acrylonitrile, and pre-polymerized polybutadiene rubber. And those are brought together with a solvent, and that solution goes through a series of reactors. There's this image here is depicting one reactor, but it actually goes through a series of reactors, and we're building that molecular weight of the SAN and simultaneously dispersing the rubber to optimize the particle size of the rubber through agitation. And that polymerization is started by with an initiator, and in the presence of that initiator is how that molecular weight is built. And it's a free radical polymerization method. And towards the end of that, we devolatilize the unused monomers, and that goes into a recycle stream that can be reused in the process. So with that, it's a continuous process that does not require many additives for that process, and allows us to run these very large campaigns that are very consistent and many times you will get several shipments of material from the same campaign or batch number. So that's also important for the consistency that you receive and the quality that you receive. On the top right, the emulsion process is a good bit different. So you first are building the rubber, and that is essentially a latex process where water is the continuous phase, and you need an emulsifier in that process. And then that rubber goes to a second stage where it's combined with styrene and acrylonitrile, and that SAN phase begins to polymerize, and that turns into a grafted rubber concentrate. So it's a heavily loaded rubber concentrate, and then there are more additives of salt and anti-foam agents that are used, and then that water has to be taken off of the material and dried. And then there's a final step where that grafted rubber concentrate is combined with additional styrene acrylonitrile in the compounding step. So it's a batch process that gives more lot variation. There are a lot more additives that are required for this process, and from that, it has a big role in the benefits that we see. Another aspect of the benefits with mass ABS is the rubber particle sizing, which you can see in the bottom two images resulting from these two processes. With the mass ABS on the left, you can see much larger rubber particle size versus the emulsion on the right. So this image is taken using transmission electron microscopy, and the light gray is the continuous SAN phase, and the darker color that you see is the rubber itself. So how we get that image is we stain the rubber with a solution, and that's how this shows up. That solution shows where the carbon-carbon double bonds are in the rubber itself, and so that's how we see that. And remember that will become important on a slide later on. So what we see here with the mass ABS, the rubber particles have these large occlusions in light gray, so it has the SAN matrix inside the rubber particle itself, and that allows for a higher efficiency of the rubber with respect to the toughness or impact resistance. So the toughness comes from the total phase volume of the rubber, and so that allows that SAN occlusion in the rubber allows us, it's included in that total phase volume. So we can use much less rubber in the mass ABS to get a similar impact or toughness as compared to the emulsion product. The emulsion ABS, you can see on the right, has much smaller rubber particles, which has some benefits as well with applications that require the highest gloss levels. The emulsion ABS have historically been more used in those applications because the rubber particle size itself plays a very large part in producing that high gloss. But with the mass ABS, we can, depending on the agitation and the rubber content, we can get the rubber particle size to different. We have a wide range of production methods that we can use, and we can get really low gloss, and we can get to a high range of gloss, but not quite as high as what you see with the emulsion ABS. So now I want to get into the comparative study. So this is where we compared our Magnum 3904, and from here on out, if you just see Magnum, it's referring to Magnum 3904. This is our high impact product produced with the mass technology. And we compared that to some emulsion ABS products with similar impact performance and similar rheology with looking at the melt flow. So the biggest thing we see here in this image, which stands out, something you can see right in front of you, is the pure white base color of the Magnum products versus the more yellowish emulsion ABS. So when we quantify that, we can see we're looking at B star value, which is the yellowness, and we can see a large difference, which we can see that, right? But when we quantify that, it's anywhere from 15 units more yellow, can be even higher than that. So we wanted to add TiO2, which is commonly used in various industries and widely used for its opacity properties in plastics. And so this is where we see a large benefit. So we compared using a 4% white master batch that contains 50% TiO2 and using the same amount of that master batch with the Magnum ABS versus the emulsion ABS, you can still see a large difference in the B star value, even with that much TiO2 in the product. So we wanted to get the same yellowness level, see how much it would take, and it took 3 times as much of the white master batch to get to around the same level. So 12% versus using 4%, which can lead to cost reduction. So what I'm showing here is the cost of a white master batch being $4 per pound, and that's just a reference point. You may be paying much less than that, so it's just a reference point to what you could experience with the percentage change to get to the same bright white color. So with that difference, the difference could be 32 cents per pound. So if you're paying $2 per pound, then you can say that it should be around 16 cents. So you can extrapolate from there for your application. One other thing to consider if you need to add more TiO2 is the effect that it will have on the impact, the toughness of the product. You're going to see a decrease. Those TiO2 particles, inorganic particles, are very coarse, and you will see a decrease in the toughness if you need more of that in the product for the aesthetic value. So just in that difference, we could see a 15% drop in the toughness of the product having more of that TiO2 there. So 2% total versus 6% total, we saw a 15% drop. One other aspect to consider is the density. So the TiO2 is a very dense material, and you're going to essentially increase your weight per part. So that could increase your cost as well. You're paying by the pound. So one other thing to consider. So another risk with having to highly load TiO2 is causing agglomerations of the colorant. And this was an example of where surface defects were observed, and we investigated that and found the defect was resulting from agglomeration of the TiO2 particles in the product. So another risk, so if you're able to reduce that risk and reduce that level of TiO2, and you reduce your risk of agglomeration and surface defects also. So not only in white colors, bright white colors we've seen a big advantage there with the mass product. But I wanted to highlight other colors as well. And this image shows a bright green, and this was used, the same green master batch was used with the emulsion product on the left and the Magnum product on the right. And you can clearly see here the brighter green, the more chromatic color that was achieved using the same color concentrate. So what this can allow for is some flexibility in potential cost savings, or being able to achieve brighter, more chromatic colors that you might not otherwise be able to. So it was very exciting to see this. And not only, you know, even in something like a yellow, I've seen where we were able to reduce the colorant in that product. And these chromatic colorants are very expensive, much more expensive than TiO2. So even small changes can lead to very good cost savings in other colors as well. So even in that yellow color where you see the emulsion product is more yellow, you might think that it might not be an advantage there because you're starting with something more yellow, but you're actually having to cover up that specific hue of the emulsion product. And with the more pure mass ABS product, you're able to highlight the colorant itself, and you're not having to cover up that substrate material. So we also looked at weathering properties, and here we looked at QUVA weathering, and we measured the color change over time. And this was with the 4% white master batch in each. So equivalent samples of the mass ABS and the emulsion ABS. And what we could say here is we could see, we're calling this a 50% slower aging due to the color change difference that we see in these products. And we also looked at QUVB weathering, and not quite as good of a difference, but still a pretty large difference of 30% slower aging based on the color change from 0 time to 300 hours. So this allows some flexibility with UV additives. You can achieve greater performance, or you can potentially reduce the UV additives that you're using in the product if it requires it. So a big benefit here, and a lot of this is resulting from the additives that are used in the emulsion process, the residuals that are present, and also from the rubber particle size itself. So the rubber particles are much smaller in the emulsion process, so you have more total surface area. So you have more total surface area that UV energy can be absorbed. And in addition to that, to have the same type of toughness or same impact performance, it requires more rubber, more total rubber in the emulsion product versus the mass. So in the mass product, we have less rubber and we have less total surface area with the larger rubber particle size and those occlusions that are in the total phase volume. So one highlight there for the weathering. So here I wanted to, this is not directly related to the comparative study, more ABS resin attribute of what you could look at if you are experiencing part failure, something you can look at to see if it's related to the UV energy absorption. So on the left, I'm focusing on the rubber aspect, and on the right, the FTIR spectrum for focusing on the SAN component. So there's two modes where you could see degradation due to UV energy exposure. And those TEM images that I was talking about earlier is what we're seeing here on the left with the rubber. So on the top, there's no UV exposure. And the top of this image represents close to the surface. So this is a cross section of the sample. And on the top, you can see it's consistent from bottom to top of that cross section. So the sample that was exposed to UV energy, you can see near the surface, it looks like that rubber is disappearing because you're not seeing it in this image. It's actually still there. It's not disappearing, but those double bonds that the stain attaches to allow us to see that rubber, the double bonds are going away because of cross-linking of the rubber. So that's going to become more brittle with additional cross-linking at the surface from that UV degradation. And then the second aspect of the ABS where you can see exposure is in the styrene acrylonitrile continuous phase. Here in the yellow is with no UV exposure. And in the blue, you can see a difference in the spectra here at 3500, where you're getting a nitrogen-hydrogen stretching bond coming into play from the SAN matrix degradation. And then you're also getting a carbonyl functionality around 1700 wave number. So then we also looked at thermal stability. We did a repass study in a twin screw extruder with the emulsion ABS, which you see in the vials on the top, and then with the mass ABS in the vials on the bottom. And you can see the color change as it took place with each pass. What we observed here was that the overall change in yellowness was very similar in both products. There was not a huge advantage to the overall change in yellowness in either product, but where you start at with the emulsion product and where we ended at with the mass product, we were still less yellow than where we started with the emulsion ABS. What was interesting, as you can see visually, there is a greater change visually, and what that change is the redness and the A star values that we measured. This was more interesting because there was a much greater shift in that redness with the emulsion product versus the mass magnum product. So with the mass product, it shifted less than 2 units more red. So with the A star value, the positive being red and the negative being green, it's shifting more red, the more positive that number becomes. So the emulsion product shifted a little more than almost 6 units more red. So allowing using this information to be able to use regrind and keep that in the process, and also being consistent and being able to predict what type of shifts that you will see in your process depending on the level of regrind that you're using. So I thought this would be valuable information, and the thermal stability allowing you less color shift in that redness with the mass ABS. So we're going to talk about the product purity, and this information was gathered using a DSC, differential scanning calorimeter. And you can see in the left, the mass ABS, the Magnum 3904, where we see one transition, one thermal instance, where the glass transition is. So around 109C for the glass transition, or 105 in the midpoint. And that's the only thermal instance that we see. And the emulsion product, we see several instances that result from the residuals and additives that are in the product. These are could be low molecular weight additives for processing, and could also be something that's specific to the performance of this product also. But there are a lot of other things present is the main point of this from a purity standpoint. And where that comes into play is with the VOCs and the volatile organic compounds, which are becoming very important in many applications, especially it's been very important in automotive, becoming more and more important in indoor applications, but it's also important for the processors, the processing and the smells that you smell during processing are resulting from the VOC levels. And so we measured this in these products using headspace gas chromatography, and the units are in micrograms of carbon per gram of ABS. So we can see a large percentage change in those VOC levels with this Magnum ABS versus the emulsion ABS, anywhere from 80 to 420% increase in those levels. So last but not least of this comparative study, I wanted to talk about unmelts or gels, as we call them, which become very important in surface defects. If you're experiencing surface defects, gels can be in every polymer, and it can come down to the quality resulting from the raw materials that you use and the process capabilities that you have during the polymerization process. So in sheet extrusion, where you might be extruding a thick sheet, and the gels can be throughout the cross section of that sheet, and even though you may not see them in the sheet as it comes out of the extruder, it may become more visible or more detrimental to causing defects when it's drawn down in the thermoforming process. But a lot of times you can see the defects in the sheet extrusion as well, but it becomes more prevalent the thinner that material becomes, the thinner the substrate becomes, it becomes more prevalent. So gels with ABS specifically can come from tube modes, can come from the SAN matrix or the rubber itself. And what a gel is a high molecular weight tail, high molecular weight fraction of the material that's not going to flow as well. It's that high molecular weight is not going to allow as much flow, which can cause other issues than surface defects. It can cause processing issues where you may be plugging your screen packs, can cause issues with inconsistencies. You may have showers of gels. It may not necessarily be dispersed evenly or homogeneous throughout the product. You may experience showers of gels in that product. So it comes down to the process capabilities that we have and the raw material selection and how we bring those together to really control and produce a very good quality ABS product to reduce those gel levels. And we see that as a big advantage in our process. So we wanted to quantify that, and this is data that's normalized to the Magnum 3904. So you can see here with medium gels, anywhere from 2.5 times to 6 times as many of the medium gels. And then with larger gels, it even becomes more prevalent. So 15 times to a little over 50 times the level of gels that we see in our Magnum 3904 product. So it can be very important for many reasons, but I wanted to share this information as it could be beneficial if you're experiencing process inconsistencies that could be related to this, or you could be getting surface defects that you want to eliminate. This very important information. So how do we quantify this? We have a quality control process where we extrude a thin film of the material, and there's a camera system set up to count the specific types of gels that we see, the defects in that material, so we can quantify and control what we let out as good quality. So it's very important to be able to test and understand that also. So just as a summary, we talked about the white natural color of the product that could result in less pigment cost, or you could achieve brighter colors that you might not otherwise be able to. There is a saturation point with colorants in the material, so there is some point where you cannot put any more colorant in that material. So at that point, you would be able to achieve brighter colors or use less of that colorant. Better UV stability. We went through that with the flexibility of reducing UV additive costs or achieving better weathering performance, and the thermal stability, being able to predict that color shift and have fewer color corrections, with being more consistent product and being able to anticipate what that shift will be based on how much you're putting in. And so very important information. And the purity as well, being a low odor and allowing for more processing consistency with those low volatile organic compound percentages, and the lower gels for improved surface quality and less scrap and reject based on those surface defects. So here I'm going to go through, this is a list of our standard ABS grades, and this is showing information based on melt flow rate, MFR at 220C and 10 kg, and the VICAT softening temperature, as well as the notched IZOD impact resistance. So we have a range. This is listed in order from lowest to highest melt flow rate. And we have a wide range of products with the lower melt flow rate, which is a single shear rate rheology data point that is, I'm sure most of everyone on this call knows what melt flow rate is, but some may not. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit. The lower melt flow rate is typically what is used in extrusion, like sheet extrusion, and then the higher melt flow rates are typically, more prevalent in injection molding for complex mold geometries. So it's very important. We have a wide range of those, and impact as well. Some of the highest impact that you will see with ABS, we have that available with the Magnum 3904, which is also one of the industry leading cold impact resistance values for that product as well. So we have a wide range. We have a wide range of gloss values. Like I said, I mentioned before, we're able to fine tune the process. So we have low gloss products, we have medium gloss products, and we have some products like this Magnum 8391, which is the highest gloss product that we have, that can get up to around 90. And when we talk about gloss, that can be a result from the processing itself. So there are some adjustments that you can make in your process to lower or increase the gloss level. So important to consider as well. We also have some special ABS grades. So we talked about the gels with the 3904, and there are some applications that require even fewer gels, fewer to lower the risk of those surface defects. So we have a good, better, best lineup of these products. So what we looked at was the regular grade, and then we have a smooth grade of that product, and we have an ultra smooth grade. So we have a good, better, best option in those products that require those smooth surfaces. And we have that in the high impact version and in a medium impact Magnum 3404 version. And one of the other special ABS grades is the Magnum Matte, which is a ultra low gloss surface finish with in that medium impact and medium flow rate range. So that's my presentation. That's my information that I wanted to share. Here's a list of contacts that in the different regions. If you wish to reach out to us, we'd be happy to have a more in-depth conversation with you on your applications and where those could benefit. So I think we'll open up the Q&A session. Bryan, you want to do that?
Sure, and thanks so much, Jon. As always, a great presentation to everyone that attended today, and thank you for staying till the end as well if you're still listening. We have a couple of questions. I want to talk to you a little bit about the questions field in the bottom right-hand corner. If you have any questions today, please fill in that box down there. I've responded to most of you, and fortunately, there's a lot of great questions for Jon that will come across, and unfortunately, I could only pick a a couple, three of these that would really progress the conversation a little bit more from a broader standpoint. As you can see on the contacts page, you'll see my information along with John's, Pam's, and others in our region that we're willing to answer any kind of questions. And John is our technical advisor, so he's best to ask these technical questions. Some of the questions, John, came across as I can see a 30-minute conversation happening. So we'll take those offline a little bit, and we'll respond to everyone within the next 24 hours. But for now, I've picked out 4 of those questions. And John, if you have a little bit of time, let's go through those, and we'll answer the rest in the next 24 hours, and hopefully follow up with everybody soon. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Good. So this one is from Miles. Miles says ABS and plastics in general are becoming increasingly regulated from a food contact and environmental perspective. Do these different production methods satisfy those regulatory concerns? John?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as the products that I listed there, I think all of those products have an FDA compliance to those products, and so for the food contact aspect of our products, I would say yes. There are emulsion grades that have that as well, but we talked about the lower VOC levels and how that comes into play, and more pure product with increasing regulations on that. From a holistic regulatory standpoint, there's a large shift in material in some applications. For instance, from PVC to ABS in pipe and edge bending that we see. So, and we went over the benefits that we see from the lower VOC levels, so that could clearly benefit in extraction testing and what those limits are for specific applications.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. We'll keep going. We'll start with Rien. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but the question is, for single screw extrusion, what would be the ideal screw configuration and why?
For single screw extrusion, so we do have a guideline of extrusion conditions and a certain compression ratio based on the length to diameter of the extruder, and I'd be happy to we can share that extrusion guide and get more specific to your equipment. Every extruder can be, or probably is, a little different, right? I don't think any one is exactly the same. So we have a general guide that we can share, and then we can get into more specific for your specific equipment.
Perfect, John. Thank you. We'll move on to a question from Miles. Miles says, I'm currently using an emulsion ABS, and I am thinking about trying a mass process. What would I need to do to switch from a processing perspective, and will I experience a visible difference?
Okay, so with the processing aspect, I got 2 different questions there with the processing and the visual. So with the processing, both types of products can be fine-tuned with the rheology to fit that application. I think both types of products do that very well. Where we did see some benefits from the process that you might experience with the mass ABS is with the lower VOCs that could allow for more consistency. Also with the lower gel levels that could allow for more processing consistency, and just overall the larger, more consistent process of the mass product would allow for more predictable processing versus the batch emulsion grades, where you're going to see more variation that's inherent to those smaller batch process. With the visual aspect, it's going. We went through the color results that we observed, and a lot of you would expect to see an advantage, but that may require change, right? That may require a reduction, which is what we expect for the colorants, and that may require an evaluation, which can be a barrier to switching from an emulsion to the mass product, but it should allow for a benefit. But you should definitely speak with us or your color provider and let us evaluate what's the optimal formulation to achieve the same color, because you should see benefits from that.
Great, Jon. We'll move on to a question from James. James, you have many questions that we'll reach out to you and answer the rest of them in due time. But I want to ask the first question that you asked in this presentation. Do both of these processes use the same catalyst?
They use the same catalyst. We produce the mass ABS, and that requires an initiator for that to take place. And I'm not sure exactly what is used in the emulsion for that specific thing, but I don't know that answer. I don't know a good answer to that, so I'll have to cut some thought and look into that and get back to you.
Yeah, and that's okay. That's why we're here, and we can follow up with you, James, and get that information to you. I got two more questions for you, though, Jon, before we sign off. Get those real quick. Excuse me. Question number 3 is from Allison. What type of challenges would I have if I want to duplicate the color that I currently use in an emulsion process ABS if I switch to mass ABS?
Sure. So, like I said, we do expect that you would be able to use less of the colorant that you're using, but that may require, if it's a custom color with different colorants, it may require fine-tuning the levels of that. Even though you're reducing it, the combination of that may require evaluation. And I recommend that we do work to try to optimize that formulation and work with your color provider, and we can try to optimize that level. But I think you will see a benefit for sure, but it will require some legwork to get into the evaluation to achieve that benefit. Some colorants you can just reduce the color concentrate level, and some are need to be adjusted from the formulation standpoint.
Great, Jon. Thank you very much. I guess we'll end it with this last question. This is from Eric. If I understand correctly, it looks like with a continuous process, I'll have better cost savings. I'll have greater cost savings with lighter colors because of the wider base color. What kind of benefits will I see when moving into a mass process for dark colors, or is an emulsion process fine?
That's a good question, and I get that question fairly frequently. And what I like to focus on is, so in the darker colors like a black, there's not a huge benefit from the color aspect with either one. But what I do want to focus on are the other aspects that we went over with the UV stability and the thermal stability and the VOCs and the gels and all of those aspects outside of the color that come into play, that can be a huge benefit with the mass product. But from the colorant aspect with the black, I don't expect you would see a huge benefit from either.
Wonderful, Jon. Thank you so much. That was great material. We do have a little bit more time left, but it looks like some of the questions either the person has left or we have questions that I think need a little more detail oriented, Jon. Maybe a an email back to that single person, or but we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that. But thank you. We had a number of questions, I think around 15 to 20. It looks like we are doing great, and then hopefully we can answer those questions within the next 24 hours. If you have any additional questions within the next few minutes, please put it in the bottom right in your questionnaire box, and we'll hopefully be able to answer those soon. And Jon and I will be back in touch with you as soon as possible. I'll pass this back to Alex, but before I go, thank you all for your time today, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Alex?
Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, Jon. Great content and information today. I want to thank everyone for attending the webinar. Just as a reminder, we will send you a link to the recording of the presentation today so that you can watch it again and share it with others at your company. Thank you again for attending, and have a great day. Bye-bye, everyone.